Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second annual celebration of the Day of the International Children's Book, which is honored on April 2nd every year. And we are also celebrating our own growing International Youth Literature collection here at Alexander Library. April Fool, see you all tomorrow. We held the first event last year and it was all Zoom. This year we are in person and online, and so we thought it best to meet on a weekday when more folks would be on campus. Next year, variants willing, when the second falls on a Sunday, we plan on holding a large indoor-outdoor event with guest speakers, publishers, booths, and we hope to invite the community, the surrounding community, to join us. Speaking of welcome, I'm Mark Aronson. I'm an associate professor of public practice in the School of Communication and Information, and I am thrilled that a great many departments within Rutgers are here today, as that is the whole point of the IYLC, to serve all who are interested in language, culture, media, youth, art, books from the entire world. Those who are here at Alexander will find riddles on your seats, and they were selected and shared by Carolyn Berger, who is the manager of the School of Arts and Sciences Language Center. We have faculty and doctoral students here from the School of Communication and Information, the Rutgers English Language Institute, from the English Department, the Language Engagement Project, the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, and Lidong Xiang, a doctoral student from the Child Study team at Rutgers Camden. Welcome. I will introduce all of you individually when you come to speak. I do need to mention someone who isn't here. As most of you know, our dear colleague, Professor Ross Todd, suddenly and unexpectedly passed away this week. Ross was from Australia and devoted his life to the study of international school libraries, how to bring ideas and books and information and growth to young people all around the world. And while it's hard to go on with a celebration without Ross, I also hope that this celebration honors Ross, is so much in his spirit. Guests here, and for those of you on Zoom, on our shelves, or soon to be, we have some of our latest acquisitions, the entire corpus of children's books in Lao, a rich selection of bilingual books in 5 different Ethiopian languages and English, 2 recent winners of the Sheikh Zayed Prize for Best Children's Books in Arabic, a wonderful haul of international graphic novels, and soon to arrive on loan are books by the short list of Hans Christian Andersen Prize candidates. The students in my International Youth Literature class just did a mock HCA, and so you'll see many of the books you read about here in the library. This event was only possible because of the cooperation and hard work of a team from Alexander Library, including Tao Yang, Doug Allen, Mary O'Mara, Elena Schneider, the hovering presence of Mei-Ling Lo, the ever-resourceful Izzy Figueroa, and the design skills of our graduate student at SCI, Kellyanne Healy, who's here. Our collection development has been made possible by money contributed by the MI program and our chair, Professor Marie Radford, and by Associate University Librarian Dee Magnoni. But the most important person has been Doris Gable. I've known Doris for a great many years as a school and public librarian and as a leading advocate for international youth literature. She is now also a lecturer here in the MI program. Her diligence and determination are behind everything we do. And now, to start things off, let's hear from Doris as she spells out the order of events.
Thank you for those kind words, Mark. So today is, as Mark mentioned, our second annual celebration, and we hope to continue this tradition long into the future. We begin today's program with some welcoming words from Dean Potter and librarian Dee Magnoni, and Professor Lilia Pavlovsky. During this morning's event that celebrates language and culture, you'll hear some comical tales in Ukrainian, Spanish, Hebrew, Hindi, Romanian, Chinese, Japanese, and German. We'll also hear from Betsy Bird, the collection development specialist in Ohio, who's prepared a talk of some funny translated picture books that were published last year, and even a couple from this year. The complete recording of today's events are going to appear on our International Youth Literature Collection LibGuide that you'll see up on the screen shortly. And the individual tales and poems will also be on our LibGuide in a separate section that is going to be titled Read Alouds. And those read alouds will, from today, will also be residing on the LibGuide page that says Read Alouds. So you'll be able to see all of these readings in not just the languages that you'll hear today, but the languages that were presented last year as well. And along with those read alouds from today, you'll also hear a funny French tale told to us by Dr. Annette Goldsmith, and the complete recording of last year's Batchelder winner, which is titled Telephone Tales, which was prepared as a co-production of the Embassy of Italy, the Italian Cultural Institute of Washington, D.C., with the permission and courtesy of Enchanted Lion Books. We'll continue to add resources to our International Youth Literature LibGuide. This resource is a rich resource, not just for the students here, but for all people across the country who are interested in international literature, including the many members of USBBY and the International Board on Books for Young People. We've added a new page this year for bilingual book projects. And on that page is featured the books that you see on the tables if you're here in person, that are bilingual books that are published in English and 5 different Ethiopian languages. These books are a project that recently won the IBI iReads Award for promoting literacy in a country that has very little children's literature published from within the country. Many of their books in these Ethiopian languages will be added to the growing collection that is now located, I'm happy to say, on the 3rd floor. So I hope if you're here in person, you'll stop off on the 3rd floor on your way down and take a look at some of those books. We really thank the cataloging department for all their hard work. And just in time for Earth Day, you'll notice that there's a page for the UN 17 goals to sustainable living. And different international sections of IBI, the International Board on Books for Young People, have prepared reading guides that give a global perspective to this important United Nations initiative. And so with that, let's get our program started. Here's Mark.
I'd like to now invite Dean Jonathan Potter to welcome us and tell us a little bit about his past with reading and humor and books.
Morning, everybody. Morning, people here, and morning to people out in the metaverse somewhere. It was interesting being asked to do this. One of the things that I often observe is that people research things they're not good at. And I have actually written 2 or 3 papers on laughter and interaction. So I don't know whether that's a sign of this or not. So I was growing up in the 1950s with parents who were very affected by World War II. My father in Normandy landings. My mother was a land girl. She drove a motorbike around the fields while the Battle of Britain was going on overhead. They were both very left-wing. He'd probably be in prison in North America, but this was a very appropriate thing. And they were serious people, but very, very strong lovers of literature. And our family's house was full of books, and indeed my grandfather, who worked on the Daily Telegraph, and he was a Marxist of extreme form. He would have put all the bosses up against the wall and shot them. He was quite happy with that. He bought a book every day, and I can remember when he became infirm and they came to live with us, there was a room which was basically solid books. I was always taken to the library. My father would read to me every day, come what may, however busy he was or tired. But humor was an interesting thing for them. And I can remember being interested in Winnie the Pooh, because that was something that some of my friends, when I started to go to primary school, were reading. But my parents thought this was a bit bourgeois, a bit too cozy, and pointed me at other children's books, of which I loved, E. Nesbit and others. And it was intriguing looking back. So I read Just William books. I think I talked about this last year. Very big, and again, pretty bourgeois. Just William, they had a live-in maid, even though they were middle class in that sense. So they were plainly in that interwar period it was set. When I look back on it now, and it was dramatized and television, it's funny. I mean, I very, very funny. But at the time, it was a world that I didn't find funny, I just found immersive. The set of kids, and particularly the one strong female character, Violet Elizabeth Bott, who would always threaten to scream and scream until whatever you do. And now I think she's a funny character, but she seemed like an ordinary part of my life at the time. I could recognize people in the village who were like that. And so it sucked me in. The one exception to this was my father in particular liked the poetry of A.A. Milne, and I think he liked it as a kind of pathway into poetry. And I remember this one. I'm very bad at remembering people's names, remembering everything. But this poem particularly, and I think it was probably because it has Jonathan in it, Jonathan Joe, and people used to read that to me a lot, and I liked it. So just some of you will know this. I'm not going to read the whole lot, but Jonathan Joe has a mouth like an O and a wheelbarrow full of surprises. If you ask for a bat or something like that, he's got it, whatever the size is. And it goes on like that. And I found that lovely and intriguing. It made me want to read more of those. And I was actually bought these poetry books, whereas kind of forbidden from the other Winnie the Pooh. So I hope that gives a little bit of a sense of me and humor and literature. Very, very honored to start this important day off. It's great having Mark championing this within Sky and his own wonderful oeuvre and literature and so on. So I'm not going to be able to say for the whole thing, but really very excited. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Jonathan, and thanks for beginning with a poem, always wonderful. I'd like to now invite up Dee Magnoni, who's Associate University Librarian and a great supporter of the IYLC.
Thanks so much, Mark. It's really wonderful to be here, and I am Dee Magnoni, the Associate University Librarian for New Brunswick. Welcome to Alexander Library, either in person or virtually. You can see, or you could see a moment ago, that the theme for this year's event is stories are wings that help you soar every day. And I thought that the theme was especially appropriate this year as we are, on the one hand, easing up on COVID restrictions. There feels to be a lightening of our daily lives. But then on the other hand, we have the tragedy of the war in Ukraine. UNESCO estimates that 2.5 million Ukrainian children have been displaced. We need stories. We need hope. We need light. So it is an especially appropriate theme this year. Stories for children in their native languages that transport them to their home countries, to other worlds, are especially powerful. Immigrants to the United States traditionally have taught their children to speak English only. That was, we're here, we're going to be that melting pot, and we will all speak English. We've always been a tossed salad, not a melting pot, I believe, and we're acknowledging that now. The trend has reversed, and we have beautiful, powerful books available for our children. I was telling Mark that one of my grandchildren is growing up learning both German and English. Two other grandchildren are growing up learning Hindi and English. And it's quite wonderful because I did not grow up learning Polish or German or any of the other languages that might fall into my background. So we are really in a wonderful golden age here. I want to add the thanks that Mark and Doris both gave to the wonderful team here at New Brunswick Libraries
my name is Lila
who
Pavlovska, and
helped put this event together, who are back there in the audio booth and out here in front, and the wonderful partnership that we have with Sky. Thank you both, Mark and Doris. And with that, enjoy the event. Have a wonderful morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Dee, and you made the segue perfect because I did feel that we should begin this event with a story in Ukrainian because certainly that is a language and a nation and a people and a culture that are under assault. And so I have asked Lilia Pavlovska, who is an associate professor and director of the MI program, to read a story to us in Ukrainian, and if we could have that tape rolled now.
Hi, my name is Lila Pavlovska, and I'm here to read to you in Ukrainian a little children's story called Kolobok. Kolobok is this like little round piece of bread, little loaf of bread. Жили собі дід і баба, та й дожилися вже до того, що й хліба нема. Дід і каже: бабусю, спекла б ти мені колобок. Та з чого я спечу, як і борошна нема? So there lived a grandpa and a grandma, and the grandpa really wanted some kolobok. He asked the grandma to go and bake him some, and she says, how am I supposed to do that when literally there's no grain in the house? And he says, go to the little grain house and just sweep up whatever's left and just make a little kolobok. And so she did, and she put it on the windowsill to cool and to rest. А він лежав на вікні, а тоді з вікна та на призьбу, а з призьби на землю, в двір, а з дорогу на ворота, та й побіг, покотився дорогою. And so the kolobok lay down on the windowsill, and he was resting, and then suddenly he woke up, and he hopped up the windowsill onto the bench, down into the little path, through the gates, and ran and rolled all the way down past the house and into the world. Біжить та й біжить дорогою, коли назустрічив йому зайчик. Колобок, колобок, я тебе з'їм. А колобок відповідає: не їж мене, зайчику, побігайчику, я тобі пісеньку заспіваю. So the kolobok encounters a little rabbit along the way, and the rabbit says, hey, kolobok, I'm going to eat you. And the kolobok says, no, don't eat me, I'm going to sing you a beautiful song. And so he did. Я по засіку метений, із борошна спечений, я від баби втік, я від діда втік, та й від тебе втечу. Та й побіг знову, і біжить, і біжить. So he sings, the little kolobok sings this little song, and then he it gets the rabbit all excited about the song that the rabbit forgets he's going to eat him, and then he rolls away. Kolobok does this a couple of times. He runs into a wolf and does the same thing, and he runs into the bear and he says the same thing. Basically, I've run away from all these other people. I'm going to run away from you as well. And so the Kolobok continues to roll down the path, and he meets up with a beautiful fox. Kolobok, Kolobok, я тебе з'їм. Не їж мене, лисичко, сестричко, я тобі пісеньку заспіваю. Ану, заспівай. So the lisichka, the fox, says, Kolobok, I'm gonna eat you. And Kolobok says, no, don't eat me. I'm gonna sing you a beautiful song. Я по засіку метений, із борошна спечений, я від баби втік, я від діда втік, я від зайця втік, я від вовка втік, і від ведмедя втік, то від тебе втечу. And he's so proud of himself that he ran away from the rabbit and the wolf and the bear and everybody, and he's going to run away from her as well. And she says, oh, what a beautiful song. Unfortunately, I have such bad hearing. Would you mind coming closer? Why don't you just sit on my tongue and sing the song again so I could really appreciate it? And so he does. Ну й пісня така гарна, каже лисичка. Ой, тільки я не дорожувай трохи. Заспівай, но ще раз. Сідай мені на язик, щоб чутніше було. Колобок сів її на язик та й почав співати. Я по засіку метений, із борошна спечений, а лисичка його хам та й з'їла. So she ate him. As if, there was some other alternative. I don't think there is. And ultimately, I guess the message here is don't let praise go to your head. Thank you.
Or don't trust Russians bearing gas. But the next tape we will have is from Betsy Bird, who will give us an introduction to many humorous international children's books.
Hi, I'm Betsy Bird. I'm the Collection Development Manager of Evanston Public Library, and I have been asked to tell you about some of the funnier translations that have come out in 2021 and 2022 here in America. Now, I am a huge fan of translations, and I'm a huge fan of funny books. So I'm going to show you a little sampling of some of the stuff that's come out. By the way, I love books like this. I tend to keep them in my homes all the time. Both of these are quite old, but if you can get your hands on them, I just wanted to plug them really fast because I love them so much. But they are not from this year or last year. What is from last year was comparatives. Get it? Comparatives? This is a long-running series by Janet Cote, and it's a French translation. They tend to use a lot of puns, which I've always been curious about, because in terms of translations, how does that even work? In this particular case, it'll say things like close, closer. You can get a lot of good kid laughs out of this as a read aloud. Silly, sillier. It is a very fun book. Why are all the best board books French? Just curious, just wondering. It's always the case. Case in point number 2, we have the new Jean Julien. This is still not a book, the sequel to This Is Not a Book. Like that book, it is irreverent, strange, kind of pushes the boundaries of what a board book could do. For example, you open it up and popcorn falls out of the microwave of the very book, which I love. And then you just get to that next shot. Have all the kids in the audience do it together. It's so good. It's hilarious and very, very strange. There is no butt in it, though. Remember the butt from the previous book? No butts. Sorry. You're going to have to look for your butts elsewhere. This is a very different book. This is an Italian translation. Now, in the case of the first 2 books, they did not credit the translator, which I find kind of miffs me a little bit. Jill Davis was the translator on this one. And, oh, it's never not ever. This is a story of Pascaline. And Pascaline is a little bat, and she does not want to go to her first day of school. She doesn't want it, she doesn't want it, she doesn't want it, she doesn't want it. Check out these art. Oh, the art is fantastic. And then she somehow manages to shrink her mother and father into tiny little bats that she can take with her to school. It's a perfect situation, except the little parents require so much looking after, and she's not able to have fun with the other bats at school. Expressions and the writing and the whole thing is both charming and very funny and very strange, which is a wonderful combination. So please look for Never Not Ever. Another one from last year that I absolutely loved, Can You Whistle Joanna? By Ulf Stark, and it was illustrated by Anna Höglund. This is a Swedish translation, also by Julia Marshall, who gets around apparently. This is a very sweet story about two boys. One of them does not have a grandfather, so they go to the nearest old folks' home to pick one out. They find one. They proceed to have a wonderful time with him, visit him on a regular basis, and it's just charming. This is the kind of book that I hand to people who are like, I don't really like translations. I find them a little weird. I don't know why I don't like them. I just don't like them. This is the book you hand them. They read it. They love it. It's funny and strange and marvelous. And who wouldn't want to go to an old folks home to pick out a grandfather? Why not? The last one that I'm going to tell you about, this is a delight. So this is Telling Stories Wrong by Gianni Rodari. So this is another Italian translation. In this particular case, translated by Anthony Sugar. And of course, once again, I'm sorry I'm repeating these, but it's Beatrice Alamagna doing the art on this. The same person who did Never Not Ever, though you wouldn't know it because she changes up her style. It shows that grandfathers can be goofy, because this grandpa is telling stories totally wrong, and his poor granddaughter has to constantly be correcting him the whole time. It is a hoot. You have to check it out, and a bunch of other funny books if you get a chance.
Thank you, Betsy, on tape, for sharing that. Now, live and in person, Nella Navarro, who's Associate Director of the Rutgers English Language Institute and Assistant Teaching Professor in the Department of English Writing Program, will read to us.
Sorry, guys. So before I begin, of course, I want to thank you both and the whole team for putting this beautiful day together. I wasn't able to be with you last year, so I'm really so excited to be here and to be here with folks and just to have the experience that we haven't had in 2 years. So I'm really grateful and also grateful for the opportunity to do something that I don't always do as often as I'd like, which is to speak my language on the Rutgers campus outside of the classroom. So I'm really excited to share something here with you. Before I do so, though, I do want to take into account and to thank and honor all of you who remembered that stories for children in particular, but especially funny stories, are really necessary and important at this time. And around the world, in addition to the Ukraine, there are children around the world for whom this is quite literally the only sense of hope and belonging and future that they have. So just want to sort of, again, thank you all for bringing that to our attention. I also just want to say something briefly about language before I begin. Rutgers English Language Institute, which is where I come from, which seems odd because it's the English department, I work with international students. And so I'm working in languages all the time. Again, really an extraordinary opportunity to remember that while we seem to tend to be very monolingual, I was happy to see the idea of remembering the translations. The U.S. was in fact founded as a multilingual. It's our inheritance. You know, somewhere along the line, we sort of lost that. And I think it's time, thank you, Dean, for pointing that out. It's time for us to celebrate what perhaps in the past we hadn't celebrated before. So I'm going to begin by sharing with you a a really, what I think to be one of the, probably the most important comic strips in the history of the Spanish language, one that has been translated. I think some of you probably have heard of this comic strip, and probably the most wonderful thing about this comic strip is its ability to resonate across the world, but especially, and I appreciated the work that you have all done to create this collection, the rights-based lens work, which is, resonates very much with my work. As a child of very highly educated immigrant parents from Colombia, books were my life. And I almost teared up because in my wallet is my mother's card. We call it the death card as a joke, but it's the church, the card that we create in the Catholic Church in particular, to honor someone during in this case, during the Mass. And the reason I bring that up is because the card is connected to what I'm about to read in a moment. In order for my mother to get us all to love reading, she thought it would be really important to make the reading fun and to focus on humor. And so this card, that honors my mother's life, upon her death, resonates for many people, particularly in Colombia, because it's a card from a poem called, literally the book, and it literally begins with, Es puerta de luz un libro abierto. And so literally an open book is a door, portal to light. And so I want you to think about that as I just read briefly about Mafalda. She's a 6-year-old girl who makes incredible and incisive observations about the world around her. And she's very interested and curious about the frailties and the foibles and what she sees as the silliness and the, frankly, not so smartness of adults. Quino, otherwise known as Joaquin Salvador Tejon, that's his actual name, but Quino was his pseudonym. He was an Argentine Spanish cartoonist, and when he created this strip from 1964 to 73, it became an immediate sensation, and she has become a cultural icon, and some folks would even say that Mafalda is the kid we all still want to be. So I'm gonna read it all in Spanish and just give you a one-sentence kind of recap. So, I can. ¿El jardín de infantes es carrera, mamá? No sé. ¿Qué? ¿Qué va a ser una carrera? Entonces, cuando lo termine, no tendré, menos mal, te juro, que siento tan chiquita. No quería, mamá, no quería, te juro. ¿No querías qué? Tener que irme del país, como todo el que termina su carrera. ¿Por qué todos los que terminan una carrera se van al extranjero? Bueno, tal vez porque aquí no tienen suficiente campo. Pero decime, con todo el campo que tienen aquí las vacas, ¿por qué demonios también ellas se van al extranjero? So just gonna give you the sort of the quickie. Mom, is kindergarten a profession? No, don't be silly. How can it be a profession? So when I'm done with kindergarten, I don't have to, oh, thank goodness. I swear, Mama, I swear. I'm so young. Since I'm so young, I don't want to. I don't want to, I swear. You don't want to what, Mafalda? I don't want to leave the country, like everybody who finishes their studies does. The mother is speechless, and in fact, it's pretty cool because in the panel of the comic strip, he draws her without a mouth. Now she goes to her father. Why does everybody who finishes their professional studies leave the country? Well, maybe it's because there aren't, enough, there isn't any, open space for them to, open space? Give me a break, Dad, give me a break. All the space that the cows in Argentina have, and you're telling me that, come on, why don't the cows go abroad? We need our people. Thank you. So just one last point before I leave. Mafalda was chosen not only in Argentina, but in many Latin American countries, any Spanish-speaking countries, as a kind of iconic figure for children's rights. And so in libraries and in schools, she's seen as an iconic figure, the voice of children's rights. And that was how she's come to be known to us today. And it's always through humor. She's always, chastising, laughing, joking about the plight of adults and how adults just don't get it, and the next generation kids are. And I think it's pretty relevant. I want to end on this note. This reading is for all our students who give us light, who give us hope, and who remind us not to take ourselves too seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. I loved hearing the Spanish. And now we'll hear, and this will be our first example of a Zoom live. Doa Rashad is an associate teaching professor in the English department, director of the Language Engagement Project, and co-director of the Language and Social Justice Initiative at Rutgers, New Brunswick. She is a transnational from Egypt, where she used to teach English as a foreign language. And now we will hear from Doa zooming in to us.
Hi. Can you hear me? Is this clear? Good, thank you. Let's see, thank you so much for having me. This is an opportunity, like my friend Nella Navarro, this is an opportunity for me to speak Arabic outside of my family, literally outside of my family. Other than that, I don't get a chance to speak Arabic at all. Although the Language Engagement Project where I work does offer opportunities for students to learn and speak different languages, Arabic included, I myself don't get a chance to do this. On today's topic, humor, I think of humor and laughter and mocking sometimes to be natural dispositions in human beings that we see around us in society in different manners. I think humor is more salient when it depicts real life experiences that we live through. It can make sense of what could be confusing and sometimes saddening situations. I personally think of humor as therapeutic, although I'm a little bit cynical, so my jokes are not that funny. So that's not gonna happen. I tried. Today, I wanted to talk about a very famous character in Arabic literature of being a wise fool. His name is Joha in Arabic. Joha is his work appeals to young children, but also to adults. His work comes across as someone who would follow the rules that society agrees upon, but he does not have a problem criticizing those rules and speaking out loud and about this. And because of that he also almost always gets into trouble. But as a child, I wanted to share something that I have always been told, this story about Joha and people's opinion. And I looked for this story online, and let me share the screen with you because I was very excited to see it illustrated. So for those who don't know Arabic, Arabic is written and read from right to left. The picture on the screen, the story on the screen, when I click to move to the next page, it actually moves from left to right. It wasn't until halfway through that I realized that I was turning left to right, but reading right to left on pages illustrated left to right. It is confusing, but eventually I got it right. So I think I'm not going to make any mistakes in reading. That's the beginning of the story. This is actually how Joha was described in the literature. He's also believed to be an actual character, a real person, real life, although stories about him are not all exactly the same, like about his life, but there is always fiction in what was told about him. One quick note, if you look at the title, Joha and the People, written in Arabic, and compare that sentence to the sentence below, the first, next to the picture, Qala Joha al-Ibni, there are signs on top and below the letters, and these are the equivalent of vowels in Arabic. So no vowel letters in Arabic, there are vowels signs. And up until 5th grade, all students learn those signs. Any literature for people after 5th grade doesn't have those signs, and an Arabic reader is expected to know exactly how to pronounce the vowels, even though they are not included in the text. So, جحا وكلام الناس. قال جحا لابنه: هذا يوم جميل يا أمير، فالشمس مشرقة والسماء صافية، ولذا فإني سأذهب إلى سوق القرية المجاورة. قال أمير فرحا: الأمر كما ترى يا أبي، سأعد لك الحمار وأذهب معك. قال جحا: لا مانع من أن تكون معي يا أمير، هيا بنا. أعددت الحمار يا أبي، فهيا بنا للسوق. قال جحا: هيا يا أمير، اركب أنت الحمار وسأسير أنا. قال أمير: لا يا أبي، هذا لا يصح، اركب أنت وسأسير أنا. قال جحا: أشكرك يا أمير، ولكن والدك بدين كما ترى، وبعض السير يفيده. وهكذا ركب جحا وابنه الحمار، ركب أمير الحمار وسار جحا. فرآهما رجلان وقال أحدهما للآخر: انظر كيف يركب الغلام ويترك والده المسكين الذي رباه يسير على قدميه، فما أسوأ هذا الأدب. قال أمير: يا أبي، ألم أقل لك تفضل أنت بالركوب وسأسير أنا؟ فركب جحا الحمار، فقابلتهما جماعة، فقال أحد أفرادها: يا لقسوة قلب هذا الرجل، أيركب الحمار ويدع هذا الصغير الضعيف يسير على قدميه؟ توقف جحا بالحمار قائلا: ماذا نفعل لنرتاح من ألسنة الناس؟ ثم ركب كلاهما الحمار، وأخيرا وجدنا طريقا معقولة يا أمير بعيدة عن النقد. وما إن سار قليلا حتى صادفهما آخرون، وقال بعضهم لبعض: انظروا إلى قسوة جحا، فهو ذو جسم كبير، ويركب هو وابنه معا هذا الحمار الضعيف الهزيل، أليست في قلبه رحمة؟ جلس جحا على الأرض قائلا: لقد أصبحت في حيرة من أمر هؤلاء الناس، فكيف نصل إلى إرضائهم؟ فكر جحا ثم قال: اسمع يا أمير، لنترك الحمار يسير ونحن نسير على أقدامنا خلفه. فصادفتهما جماعة من الناس فقالوا: انظروا إلى هذين الأحمقين اللذين يسيران على أقدامهما في هذا الحر اللافح والغبار المتكاثف دون أن يركب حمار واحد منهما. حمل جحا الحمار وقال: ما رأيك يا أمير في هذا التصرف؟ لنترقب ماذا يقول الناس الآن، فقد يرضيهم ذلك. صادف جحا وابنه رجلين، فقال أحدهما للآخر: يا للعجب، يا للعجب العجاب، انظري إلى جحا ويحمل حماره، لقد فقد عقله. قال جحا لابنه: لقد جربنا كل طريقة ولكن لم نسلم من كلام الناس، وصدق المثل القائل: الناس لا يعجبهم العجب ولا الصيام في رجب. The story is about Joha and his son trying to go to the market. They were deciding who gets to ride the donkey. Joha at the beginning offered his son. The son said, "You're my dad. You have to be the one riding. I walk." Eventually, he said, "Well, I'm fat. I could use some walking." And they tried to alternate. Every time they decided to use the donkey or to ride the donkey in a certain way, there was always someone who criticized them. Either the son was not grateful enough for his dad to have his dad ride, or Joha was riding and letting his son walk in the desert, or both of them riding the poor donkey, or both of them walking and not making use of the donkey. And finally, Joha actually got tired, so he carried his donkey and tried to see what people would react. And these types of stories tend to generate conversation between parents and children about what is the moral of the story, and the kids will try to make connections between the morals and different other stories. So here the moral is that you will never satisfy everyone in life, no matter how much you try. And people will always find something to criticize and critique. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will now have Gabriela Constantine Duretch. Okay, I just have to say quickly, right after that, we will have hear from Daphna Lemesh, and there's so many interesting links between what we just heard in Arabic and what we will hear in Hebrew very shortly. including the vowels. Please.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for organizing this and thank you for having me. I'll read something in Romanian. And it's by Ion Luca Caragiale, we consider him our national playwright. He's actually one of the inspirations of Eugen Ionesco, who might be more known to most people. And I remember my cousin, who's 7 years older than me, forcing me or encouraging me to read his plays because she had to read them in school. So that kind of led to me also writing plays on my own. So kind of like, you know, forcing me to read led to this path in a way. So I guess thank you. So a little bit of background about what I'm going to read. Caragiale, the author, his comedies focus on how Romania dealt with change and hardship, especially as new modern things were like introduced in a society that was trying to develop, was trying to become westernized, but had been attacked by forces from everywhere at that time. So his plays satirically depict this adjustment, right? And right now I'm reading an excerpt from O scrisoare pierdută, A Lost Letter. And the plot can be briefly summarized as the wife of a party leader loses a love letter that was written to her by her lover, who's actually a friend of the party leader. But then the opposition gets that letter, and there's this whole game of like, okay, I'm gonna publish it, I'm not gonna publish it, what do you give me? Specifically, I'm reading the first scene, which doesn't get to that point yet with the love letter, but it's a conversation between Pristanda, who's the local officer, and Tipătescu, who is the party leader. And they're actually talking about the hardships of existing. Specifically, Pristanda talks about the hardships of raising a family on not such a great salary. And then the party leader says like, oh, but I know you have your ways of getting around what I actually pay you, which is very typical humor in Romania. We deal with humor just as a way to deal with life and all the hardships that we encounter. So I'm going to start reading. I'm going to try to have 2 voices so you can distinguish the characters, but I might not be able to do that as well. Rușine pentru orașul nostru să tremure în fața unui om, rușine pentru guvernul vitreg, care dă unul din cele mai frumoase județe ale României, pradă în ghearele unui vampir. Eu vampir ai, caragios. Curat caragios. Pardon, să iertați, coane fănică, că întreb. Vampir. Ce e aia vampir? Unul care suge sângele poporului. Eu sug sângele poporului. Dumneata sugi sângele poporului. Aoleu. Michel. Curat Michel. Murdar. Curat murdar. Ei, nu se alege. Nu se alege. Cu toată descălimea dumnealui, cu toată societatea moftologică a dumnealui, degeaba. Să-mi rază mie mustățile. Și mie. Dar în sfârșit, las-o asta. Lasă-l să urle ca un câine. Curat ca un câine. Începusești să-mi spui istoria de aseară. Cum vă spuneam, coane fănică, aseară a țipit semnițel după masă, precum e misia noastră, că acum dumneavoastră știți că bietul polițai n-are și el ceas de mâncare, de băutură, de culcare, de sculare, ca tot creștinul. Firește. Și la mine, coane fănică, să trăiți. Greu de tot, ce să zici. Familie mare, renumerație mică după buget, coane fănică. Încă de-aia nevastă mea zice, mai roagă-te și tu de domnul prefectul să-ți mărească leafa, că te prăpădești de tot. 9 copii, coane fănică, să trăiți, numai puțin. Statul n-are idee de ce face omul acasă, ne cere numai datoria, dar 9 copii și 80 de lei pe lună, familie mare, renumerație mică după buget. This is the officer just trying to plead and saying like, you pay me 80 lei, which is our local currency, and I have 9 children. And how like the state doesn't actually like pay its citizen, which I think we can all empathize even nowadays. Nu-i vorbă, după buget e mică, așa e, decât tu nu ești băiat prost. O mai cârpește aici de acolo, dacă nu curge pică, las că știm noi. Știți, cum să nu știți, coane fănică, să trăiți? Tocmai dumneavoastră să nu știți. Și nu-mi pare rău, dacă știi să faci lucrurile cu minte, mie îmi place să mă servească funcționarul cu tragere de inimă. Când e om de credință, coane fănică, să trăiți. Nu mă uit dacă se folosește și el cu o para, 2. mai ales un om cu o familie grea. 9 suflete coane fănică, 9 și renumerație, după buget. Mică să rămână coane fănică. Lasă ghiță, cu steagurile de alaltăieri ți-a ieșit bine, ai tras frumușel condeiul. Curat condei. Adică te cum condei coane fănică? Contul jidanului s-a plătit la comitet pe 44 de steaguri. Da, ei, s-a pus 44 de steaguri. S-a pus coane fănică, s-a pus. Poate 1-2 să le fi dat vântul jos, dar s-a pus. So that was it. Thank you so much for having me and thank you for organizing this.
I should have introduced Gabriela, who is a graduate research assistant for the Language Engagement Project and a doctoral student in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese. We will, in a moment, hear Daphna's tape. I have to say, when Daphna, who is a distinguished professor and associate dean in the School of Communication and Information, when I saw her tape, I was so happy because what she chose was, in a way, almost my beau ideal of what I wanted to be here. And you will see how well it fits with the Arabic story. So we'll now roll Daphna's tape.
Hi, everyone. I'm Daphna Lemish, and I want to share with you a story in Hebrew. It's a part of the people of Chelem, the wise people of Chelem. It's part of a very famous Jewish folklore. And children and youth in Israel grew up learning about those stories, reading them, laughing at them. So it's very much part of the culture in Israel. So what you see here is that Chelem is a real village. You can see by the train station, there is the word Chelem. We pronounce it Ch in Hebrew, but I don't know how it will be pronounced in English, Shelem maybe. And you see various images from the village of Chelem, which is in Poland, close to the eastern border. And on the right corner, on the bottom, you see a sign of a Jewish cemetery in Chelem that was destroyed during the Holocaust. So there is a real place called Chelem, and the stories of the wise people of Chelem are part of that folklore. Okay, so here's a story, one of the many ones. Okay, good idea if I could move this forward. Okay, so the story goes like this. I'll read part in Hebrew and I translate. It's the story of the broken bridge. כמו רבות מהערים בעת הישנה, גם חלם הוקמה על יד נהר רחב ידיים, ועל הנהר היה גשר עץ, ושיני הזמן חרצו בגשר. והוא הלך ובלה והלך ובלה, והקרשים אשר היו מסודרים לכל אורכו החלו מתנדנדים. So like many cities at the old time, Chelem was established by a big river, and it had a wooden bridge, but the wooden bridge was getting old and it became more and more deteriorated, and the wood parts on it were starting to kind of shake, and the bridge started to break. יום אחד טיפס ילד על הגשר, לפתע דרך על אחד הקרשים המתנדנדים, מעד וקיבל מכה בברך. וביום אחר סבל עם שק קמח כבד על גבו, טיפס על הגשר, לפתע דרך על אחד הקרשים המתנדנדים, איבד את שיווי משקלו, שמט את השק וכל הקמח אבד. It goes on and on. It tells a story that one day a boy went on the bridge, but he fell and hit his knee. And the next day, a person with a big, heavy sack of wheat on his back went on the bridge, but then fell because of lost his balance and fell because of the broken bridge, and all the flour got lost. But then one day, a very important aristocrat on his horse and dressed really nicely was riding the bridge, but the bridge again was broken, and the horse got caught in one of the pieces of wood, got worried and threw the aristocrat into the water in the river, and just by miracle this important aristocrat did not drown. So it continues the story. זעקו החלמאים, מילא אחרים, אבל הפעם הזאת מדובר בשיעוט רמת מעלה ומפורסמת. מה ירננו המרננים ומה ילגו הלועגים? חייבים למצוא פתרון לבעיה אחת ולתמיד, ויפה שעה אחת קודם. So the wise people of Chelem said, oh, this is really trouble. Now that there is a famous person who got hurt, it's going to be, the rumors are going to go all around Poland, and people are going to say terrible things about Chelem, and we have to do something about it. התכנסה מועצת חכמי חלם לטכס עצה, במשך 10 ימים ו10 לילות לא פסקו מלהתווכח, עד שלבסוף הגיעו לכלל הסכמה, הפתרון חייב להיות מפעל בנייה שכמוהו לא נראה. So the important wise people of Chelem got together, and for 10 days and nights, they were discussing until they arrived at some kind of conclusion. They have to have a special kind of construction that was never seen before, a major one, and that it will spread the name of Chelem all around Poland. So they collected money from every person in Chelem, and they went and got a loan for the bank in Warsaw, the main capital, and they got the money, and they bought all the construction needs that they needed and brought them to the bridge and started building. And הקימו בסמוך לגשר בית חולים מפואר, משוכלל, מאובזר ומודרני מאין כמוהו, ומאז בכל פעם שהולך בשמזל נפצע בטפסו על הגשר הרעוע, צוות הכי מיומן חש לעזרתו. So they got all the material for the construction and started building. And they built next to the bridge a beautiful, very modern hospital that has all the equipment and all the doctors and everything one needs. So next time when somebody falls off the bridge, there'll be a hospital right next door to take care of them in the best way possible. So this is a typical story of Chelem. The wise people of Chelem who are actually quite stupid or naive or whatever you want to call them. This is just one example of many, many more. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, the great thing about those stories, and it's parallel to what we heard in the Arabic stories, in a way the child is the wiser one than the adults. So now in our second Zoom, very long distance Zoom, we will have Bijal Vacharanjani, and please correct my pronunciation, speaking to us directly from India to read to us. Vijal is an editor at Pratham Books, an author herself, and an avid reader.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this today. It's just been magical listening to so many languages and so many stories from such wonderful people. And, as Mark said, I'm an editor with Pratham Books, and one of the things that I've come to realize that listening to stories in so many languages is vital, because I'm just going to cite UNESCO here, that in a research, they've said that children should be taught in a language they understand. Yet as many as 40% of the global population don't have access to education in a language they speak or understand. I'm a big fan of librarians because you do something so important, getting children access to books, which unlocks the power of imagination. And given we are at a time in history where we need humor, we need poetry, we need imagination, I have chosen a poem. It's called Gappu Gola, and it's written by Jitendra Bhatia, originally in Hindi, and it's illustrated by Vishnu Nair. The original poem, which I will read to you, it celebrates nonsense verse, and it's a poem that the author made up to read to his child years ago. But that's the magic of poetry, right? That it feels timeless after so many years as well. And very quickly, I will show you a translation that's done by Shireen Bansal, which doesn't do justice to the original, but it will give you an idea of what's going on in this completely nonsense verse. It starts with a box opening, and Gappu Gola, which basically means a really chubby ball, tumbles out. And from there, it takes the form of a camel who goes traveling, comes back, and then on their travel, they meet a betel nut, which when they slice it half, becomes a merchant who has a really dashing mustache, who then becomes a horse who goes to the moon and back. And we call this Agram Bagram Kavita, which is, I would roughly translate it to a topsy-turvy poem, which I think is the best way I can describe it. So I'm just going to share my screen so you can see the wonderful illustrations as well. All right. Gappu Gola, written by Jitendra Bhatia, illustrated by Vishnu Nair, and you'll be reading a translation by Shireen Bansal, but I'll be reading it in Hindi. एक पिटारा हमने खोला, उसमें से निकला गप्पू गोला. गप्पू गोले के गाढ़े सूट, उसमें से निकल पड़े 100 ऊंट. 100 ऊंटों में से एक निराला, किया उसने कुछ गड़बड़ ज़ाला. गया फारसी पढ़ने सिडनी, वहां से लाया इडली चटनी. खाकर चटनी लिया डकार, सारे ऊंट हुए बीमार. ठीक हुई तो चली सवारी, मिली राह में सड़ी सुपारी. सड़ी सुपारी को जब काटा, उसमें से निकला 100 टन आटा. 9 टन आटे की गोली लपशी, उसमें से निकला लाला बख्शी. लाला बख्शी लाला बख्शी की ऐसी मूंछ जैसे हो कुत्ते की पूंछ. मूंछ घुमाकर मंतर छोड़ा, लाला बख्शी बन गए घोड़ा. घोड़ा निकला बड़ा मवाली, खाता घास उगलता गाली. खाकर मिर्च लगाई डुलती, सीधे पहुंचा चांद की धरती. वहां हवा में था एक बलून, जिसमें छेद था अफलातून. एक छेद में एयरपोर्ट था, एक में स्टेशन देहरादून. वहां से दिल्ली मेल को पकड़ा, ट्रेन की छत पर घोड़ा पसरा. गाड़ी जब पहुंची बडनेरा, मिला ट्रेन में कद्दू खीरा. उस खीरे का साग बनाया, दिल्ली पहुंच के सबने खाया. So yes, that was Gappu Gola, and completely nonsense verse, and also it takes a lot of local things like you know, when families travel on a train, you get sliced cucumber to eat, and so there are a lot of these local references that children will really delight in, and then seeing them in a context which is completely outlandish. I hope they enjoy it. I know they enjoy it as much as I do reading it out loud. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was just wonderful. It's wonderful to hear again all these languages and rhythms. It reminds me of as a child going to the UN and hearing all the different voices there. So the next tape we're going to hear from Minji Chen and Helen Wang came from when we started this project. I was really interested in humor and humorous forms in different languages. I heard from Doa that there are limericks in Arabic, and that was fascinating to me. And now we're going to learn about a poetic form in Chinese devoted to humor. And we will have this illustrated in this tape that we'll run now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Minji Chen. I work for the Coates Children's Library, a special collection of international children's literature at Princeton University.
And I'm Helen Wang. I translate children's books from Chinese to English. And together with Minjie and with Anna Gustafsson Chen, the three of us run Chinese books for young readers, which you can see in the background to Minjie's portrait.
So today, Helen and I have the pleasure of introduce you to a doggerel written during the Tang Dynasty.
So Minjie found this piece of doggerel, and I've insisted that we show you first of all the Chinese and the pinyin, because Minjie told me that when she first came across this poem, she probably read it for the first time. So the first impression she had of this poem was a visual one. And you can see that there is 2 characters in the title at the top. And in the characters underneath, there are 4 lines. And in each line, there are 5 characters. And this visually is a form of Tang poetry that was very popular. If you've heard of the poet Li Bai, a lot of his poems are written in this format. And we've highlighted in red the 3 characters that rhyme at the end of the sentence, at the end of the lines, and we've added the same characters in a romanized form on the right. But this is just one way in which the Chinese poems work. There are lots of internal rhymes and tones that go up and down or flat. There is not just a visual element to the Chinese poems, there's also a phonetic element and different kinds of pleasures. So Mingjie is now going to read the poem.
I'm going to read the Chinese poem, and you can see Helen's beautiful translation of the poem on your own. 咏雪，江山一笼统，井上黑窟窿，黄狗身上白，白狗身上肿。
And Mingjie was, I think she was joking when she said it was a very beautiful translation, because the whole point of the doggerel is that it's not what it looks as though it's going to be. It's not a beautiful poem. It's actually rather a clumsy, flat sounding poem. So I'll read it. We deliberately chose the title Snow Ode because it's no ode. And it reads, the river and mountains blur. The well is a big black hole. The brown dog's got white fur and the white dog's got very swole. It's terrible, absolutely terrible, as doggerel should be. We should say that Chinese poetry, Chinese classical poetry of the Song Dynasty and of the Tang Dynasty is really very, very beautiful. And please don't be put off by this piece. There's plenty more really beautiful poetry out there for you to go and find.
So there are many Chinese doggerels. This one is just the earliest known example. For a Chinese reader, the humor and the comic comes from the conflict between the expectation people have about this format of poetry, which is expected to be elegant, and the casual language of this poem. I hope you enjoyed our presentation.
I think they win the prize for finding a photo of a swole dog. Now we will have another tape from Dr. Sylvia Vardell, who is a professor in the School of Library and Information Studies at Texas Women's University and a great advocate of international youth literature. This will be in German.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Vardell from Texas Women's University, and I'm just thrilled that Mark has invited me to participate in your international celebration of children's humor. Thank you for inviting me. I actually grew up speaking German as my first language because both of my parents were born and raised in Germany and immigrated as adults. And one of the things that helped me learn English was poetry, actually. And so I've been a lifelong fan of poetry ever since. I thought it might be fun to share just a handful of little rhymes in German with your class. And so I just picked a few. I have a small childhood collection of books in German for children and some that I've added as an adult as well. So here we go. This is by Janosch, who is a very well-known author and illustrator. He does both the art and the writing in his books for German kids. And I think he has over 100 books to his credit now, and they've been translated into 30 or 40 languages. So he's pretty well known in Europe. And this particular book is two things. It's a story, Alle meine Entlein, and then it's a collection of some silly verses, and I mean very silly, and they kind of channel the goofy German poetry that I grew up with. So here they are, just a couple of short ones. I'll read them first in German and then just translate them roughly into English. Heile, heile Segen, 3 Tage Regen, aber 4 Tage Schnee und nichts tut mehr weh. It's written also in kind of a colloquial German, almost a slang. So you'll see in the text, it's not spelled exactly the way German words are always spelled, but basically it's hail, hail, blessings, 3 days of rain, but 4 days of snow, but nothing hurts. Okay. Heile, heile Segen, 3 Tage Regen, aber 4 Tage Schnee und nix tut mir weh. So there you go. Nothing hurts. That's the theme. Here's another one, a silly rhyme that uses the ABCs, as we often do in English rhymes as well, as a hook for a poem. A, B, C. Die Katze lief im Schnee. Und als sie wieder nach Hause kam, hatte sie weiße Schuhe an. A, B, C. Die Katze lief im Schnee. So here's a cat going for a walk in the snow. As it's coming back home, it now has on white shoes, presumably snow-covered shoes. And I love that this little rhyme starts and ends in the same way, which we often do in poetry with an opening and closing that are identical. And don't you just love his art? Kind of droll. Here's another. Leerem, lachen Löffelstiel. Wer gar nichts kann, der kann nicht viel. Wer alles kann, ist besser dran, weil ein Nashorn heben kann. Well, you can tell from the illustration that it's nonsense, and the language is fairly nonsensical too. Lichem lachem means nothing. It's just a silly, fun little phrase. Löffelstiel, I actually had to look up. I've never used that word before in my life, and apparently it means dipper stick. So I think it's mainly the alliterative fun of Lichem lachem Löffelstiel. Who can do nothing, wer gar nichts kann. Der kann nicht viel means then that person cannot do much. It's just repeating the same idea. But someone who can do everything, alles kann, is better off. And he can lift a rhinoceros. What? Nonsense. I think that is Janish's wheelhouse for sure. One more poem. This is kind of a counting poem, sort of. More nonsense. Unsere Katz hat Junge gehabt. 6er, 7er, 9er. Eines hatte Strümpfe an, die anderen hatte keine. Our cat had kittens. 6er, 7er, 9er. 6, 7, 9. One of them has stockings on, Strümpfe, socks or stockings, but the others have none. Unsere Katz hat Junge gehabt, 6er, 7er, 9er. Eines hatte Strümpfe an, die andere hatten keine. I love the rhyme and the nonsense and the numbers in there, which kids I'm sure will all respond to. And one last one, and it's also the last poem in the book, and it's kind of a lullaby poem, which is again a frequent function of poems for very young children. Let's relax, let's go to bed, let's go to sleep. Schlaf, Kindchen, schlaf. Da draußen steht ein Schaf. Das Schaf ist eine bunte Kuh. Meine Kindlein, mach die Augen zu. Schlaf, Kindchen, schlaf. And in English, that would be sleep, child, sleep. Outside, there is a sheep. The sheep is a colorful cow. My child, close your eyes. Sleep, child, sleep. So it's perhaps a play on counting sheep to fall asleep. I'm not sure if that's a thing in Germany or not. I didn't grow up with that. But the nonsense shift from there's a sheep, but it's a colorful cow is hilarious. And again, the same opening and closing. So there you go. 5 silly rhymes by János. And I hope you've enjoyed them. I did my best to do a quick reading and a quick translation, but I'm hoping that you'll find lots of fun, silly, humorous literature shared today. And I encourage you to celebrate, check out USBBY and IBBY-IBBY. I'm honored to be on the executive committee of IBBY at the moment, and that's an organization that's all about reading and children's books around the world. So I'm sure Mark has mentioned it, but let me plug USBBY and IBBY one more time. Thanks. Have a wonderful celebration.
Okay, we're rounding the clubhouse turn, so let's hear the tape that started from Tara McGowan, who is an artist, storyteller, and Japan scholar, and a frequent metadata consultant at the Kotzen Children's Library at Princeton. We heard earlier from Minji from there as well. Let's hear Tara's take.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tara McGowan, and I'm here to tell you about the role of humor in Japanese kamishibai, paper theater, street performance art. Many Americans know about kamishibai because of Alan Say's beautifully illustrated book, Kamishibai Man, based on his memories of the kamishibai storytellers. The kamishibai storytellers were also candy sellers. They would sell candy to the children before the story, and then they would tell them lively stories to make sure that the children would come back the next day to buy more candy. Usually, the stories would involve what's called katsugeki, live action stories. This is Ogonbato, the most famous and perhaps one of the earliest superheroes ever to wear a cape. After the katsugeki, the live action, the storyteller might tell a namida chodai mono, which literally means tearjerker. Now, the children who came to the street performances were street children themselves oftentimes, and they could be pretty tough customers. So you can imagine how much they would have enjoyed this cartoon about a child trying to outwit a grown-up. Ichini no san-chan no hajimari. Hey, San-chan, look at this. I got 10 cents. You want to go get some candy with me? No, I can't. I don't have any money. Hey, tell you what, Don. Why don't you give me that 10 cents and I'll show you how to make it into 50 cents. All I ask is you give me 25 cents back. Oh, okay. Hey, Mr. Iceman, can you give me some ice for a dime? Hey, sure, son. I'll give you a bargain. Thank you, mister. That makes $1.50. Business is good on this hot day. Hey, if business is so good, maybe this is a good time to play a trick on him. Mister, my ice melted on the way home. Can you give me some more? That's strange. Well, all right, but that's the last I can give you. Thank you. This kid is up to something. I better follow him and see what's going on. Step right up. Ice for sale, 5 cents a piece. Come get your cold ice on this hot day. 5 cents a piece, step right up. Oh, can you give me some? Yeah, me too. Hey, Don, we're almost sold out. I better go back and get some more. Mister, my ice melted again on the way home. You little sneak. I saw what you were up to. I followed you just now. If you want ice that bad, here, I'll give you ice. Help, I'm freezing. Oh, it's so cold. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. Ichini no san-chan oshimai. The end. Not only did the storytellers use these comic manga kamishibai to bring humor into their storytelling sessions, they also would use riddles in between each story. So they might have an ogonbato live action story and then have a riddle in between. That kept the kids' attention because if they guessed the riddle right, they might get free candy or other prizes. As you can see here, this is the character for na, but if you know Japanese, you know it's upside down, and upside down is saka-sama. So if you put saka with na, you get sakana, fish. Then they might tell the melodramatic Namida Chodai story, and They would have another quiz in between. This says, これは何という動物でしょう? What animal do you think this is? Well, you look at it, it's a Ford, an ita, with blood on it, T. Put T and ita together, what do you get? Cheetah. You might get a cheetah, or if you put it the other way around, it would be itachi, itachi, which is a kind of a weasel, I think. These are based on some real street performance quizzes or rebuses that I found in a book. But you can make your own in English or any other language just by drawing and putting words together. Here we have a ball minus the B. All plus an arm, all arm, plus C plus lock, alarm, clock, bring, bring, bring. An old-fashioned alarm clock. Thank you for listening and happy April 1st. Goodbye.
Thank you, Tara. We have just about finished the children's portion. We are ending up with what we did again last year. We are having the announcement of a prize which has been created for Best Young Adult Book in Translation. So we are going to get to hear what won this year's prize from Dr. Catherine Bumhold, who is an associate professor at the University of Southern Miss and was the chair of the GLLI committee that selected the best young adult book in translation. Let's hear that tape last.
Hello, and welcome to the Global Literature in Libraries Initiative Awards announcement. I am Dr. Catherine Baumhold, Associate Professor at the University of Southern Mississippi School of Library and Information Science and Chair of the 2022 GLLI Translated YA Book Prize Committee. Selected by an international committee of literature specialists, teachers, and librarians, the prize recognizes publishers, translators, and authors of books in English translation for young adult readers. Established to honor the most outstanding translated work originally written and published in a language other than English, the prize seeks to introduce world literature to teens and bring international culture to schools and libraries. This year, submissions included works translated from 10 languages and stories from Asia, Europe, and South America. The shortlist of 5 titles contained a variety of themes and subject matter of interest to teens and included 2 graphic novels. In accordance with the award guidelines, the committee chose this year to select 1 honor book from the shortlist. This year's honor book is The Immortal Boy by Francisco Montaña Ibáñez, translated by David Bowles and published by Levine Carrillo. Presented as a dual language text of English and Spanish, The Immortal Boy tells 2 intertwined stories, one of an abandoned family of children struggling to survive, and the other of Nina, a recently orphaned girl trying to befriend a mysterious boy who keeps to himself and protects younger children from bullies. Alternating chapters featuring various perspectives from the children and Nina explore the magical and tragic ways children facing traumatic difficulties make meaning in the world. The Immortal Boy is an engrossing, gut-wrenching narrative that can spark discussions around issues of poverty, survival, and the sometimes dark promise of hope. And the winner of the 2022 GLLI Translated YA Book Prize is Oxy, Story and Art by Mary Ahakoivu, translated by Celia Maria Arampura and published by Levine Carrillo. Told through predominantly black and white images rendered in digital art, ink, and watercolor with minimal text, this graphic novel brings a dark tale from Finnish folklore to life. In the story, a celestial being named Imu tries to trick her daughter Umi, who has taken the form of a bear, to return to the heavens. On Earth, Umi shares a sweet life with her 3 cubs and another offspring referred to as Porling, who appears as an unidentifiable creature with a giant flame for a head. Desperate to fit in and be loved, Porling ultimately unleashes violence in the woods that cannot be undone. Exploring universal themes of family, fitting in and finding peace with your own choices and those of your loved ones, this engrossing story is equal parts whimsy and wildfire, and one that readers will return to again and again. I would like to thank this year's committee for all of their hard work and commitment to excellence. This year's committee included Kim Becknell, Brooke Cruthards, Nicole Brown, Jewel Davis, Danny Glasner, Gina Krumhout, and myself, Catherine Baumhold. For more information about the Global Literature and Libraries Initiative and the YA Book Prize, as well as lists of recommended translated books for young adults, please visit us at the website on your screen. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.
So I wanted to thank all of you for coming and listening to so much. I should mention that Sarah Swan, our recent graduate, also worked on the prize. And so please come and look at the books. And thank you for being here with us and celebrating international youth literature and all of its sounds and stories. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for running.
so much.
It's just lovely hearing all the languages. These are some of the recent books that we have added to the collection. These are graphic novels. And just